Kara says she can't hear you, so you might have to hold the microphone closer. And talk louder. Because I can't hear you either with the wind.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering if you might have to go back inside. I don't know. Can you hear us, Kara? Play along here for us. Today has not been a very good day for technology. Alright, well, I'm wondering if maybe we need to go back inside, or back outside of the wind. It's pretty frustrating here along South Beach.
We have 6 viewers, so maybe somebody can tell us.
Somebody give us a shout out there. Help us. If you can hear us out there. If not, we'll have to find somewhere a little in cover. It's kind of windy out here. Are you sure it's plugged in, Chris? She said she could hear it.
Kara says she hears me really well. How about now, Kara? Everything plugged in.
Alright, I'm going to get started here and see if folks can hear us or not. I'm sure we'll know pretty soon whether we need to take cover somewhere else. So, the longest day of Dunbar Davis begins on a late August day of 1893.
Okay, wait. Kara's got another suggestion. I'm going to plug it in again. It could be sand.
Alright, let's check it in again. Let us know, and then we'll start again here for all intents and purposes. Can you hear us out there? Can you hear Chris, not me?
Hold on 1 second.
That did it, she said. Alright, let's
Go. Thank you, Kara.
You think we should start again?
Huh?
You think we should start again or not? Restart it or not? Okay. Alrighty. It's all good now, Kara. Now we're really loud. There we go. Alrighty, folks. Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon of Touring with Travis. We have not had our share of luck when it comes to technology today. This morning the Wi-Fi wasn't working at the Keeper's Cottage, and this afternoon can't hear us. So hopefully that has fixed it. We are here along South Beach to bring you the story of the longest day of Dunbar Davis. And it comes from a historian named David Stick, who wrote this book, Graveyard of the Atlantic. If you're interested in coastal North Carolina history and our heritage here, you definitely want to read this book. The term Graveyard of the Atlantic, we get it from David Stick and this book. The idea that the coastline between Cape Fear in the south here on Bald Head Island to Cape Hatteras to our north claims no less than 2,000 shipwrecks along the coastline. And that nickname, Graveyard of the Atlantic, like I said, comes from this book and from David Stick's work as a historian here in coastal North Carolina. So if you're out there listening, give us a shout out in the comments. Let us know where your connection to Bald Head Island. And if you'd like us to elaborate on something or have any questions, drop us a line there in the comments. We love to hear from you out there. It makes it fun and interactive for everybody. So our story, The Longest Day of Dunbar Davis, occurs in the late days of summer in the year 1893. And it involves two primary characters. First of all, it involves Dunbar Davis. He's the first keeper of Cape Fear Life-Saving Service Station here on Bald Head Island from about 1882, 1883 to 1892. The first decade or 10 years of the service occurring here on Bald Head Island. And you can think of the Life-Saving Service and Keeper Dunbar Davis as the precursors of the United States Coast Guard. These men served on Bald Head Island. They watched out over the beaches behind me, seeking to assist any distressed mariners and also to help salvage their cargo and their ships if a shipwreck occurred. And the second character we have is named Keeper John L. Watts. And Keeper John L. Watts took over the responsibilities at Cape Fear Life Saving Service in the year 1892 when Dunbar Davis retired from Cape Fear Station on Baldhead Island in order to help lead the new station that was constructed on Oak Island across the mouth of the Cape Fear River from Baldhead Island to our west. So those are the two primary characters in this story. Dunbar Davis in charge of the Oak Island Life Saving Service station, and John L. Watts in charge of the station here on Baldhead Island. Now you're hear me talk a lot about volunteers, that these men had to go into Southport in order to get volunteers to perform these heroic acts along our shoreline. Well, that is because from the beginning of April to beginning of September, only the keepers or the officers at these stations were employed full-time. They had a variety of folks that were employed by the government at these stations in the late fall and winter months when the hurricane season was at its prime and when our coastline gets battered by nor'easters. But throughout the summer, you did not have a crew. You just had that keeper employed full-time. So these men often in this off-season had to go into Southport and onto the mainland in order to find volunteers. And you're going to find that most of these volunteers were in fact the same men that were employed by the Life-Saving Service during their full-time seasons, September 1st through April 1st. But in a weird twist of fate, this longest day of Dunbar Davis occurs on the last week of the off-season. In just a few days, Keeper Davis and Keeper Watts would get all the men for the winter and fall months. So just a twist of fate that it's the last few days that they're on their own that these shipwrecks occur. And it all occurs on August 28, 1893. That's when our story begins. A hurricane came through this area. It landed just south of us in Charleston, South Carolina, but the outer reached the lower Cape Fear region. And on August 28th at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, here on Baldhead Island and Keeper Davis over on Oak Island noticed a schooner that was in distress just north of Cape Fear along East Beach. And that schooner was called the Three Sisters. It was a 286-ton schooner. Its captain and its mate accidentally were washed overboard, never to be seen again. So this crew was in the charge of its cook. You think the cook was probably a little in over his head. Put it, fried up some eggs in the morning, but not the best at trying to maintain a schooner, a 286-ton schooner, in the middle of a hurricane. So that schooner, the Three Sisters, it was going from Philadelphia. It was going from Savannah with a cargo of lumber back home to Philadelphia when it got caught in this storm and was in distress along East Beach. So, Keeper Watts left Baldhead Island to go across the river over to Southport to find some volunteers. And en route over across the river to Southport, Keeper Watts runs into Keeper Davis from Oak Island. Keeper Davis is on his way over to Baldhead Island to see what's up and how may he help. So in the middle of the Cape Fear River, in the middle of a hurricane, you have Keeper Watts and Keeper Davis meeting aboard boats, trying to come up with a game plan on how they're going to save this crew distressed aboard the Three Sisters, this schooner on East Beach. And it's decided that Keeper Watts is going to return over here to Baldhead Island and prepare the surf boats to perform a rescue. Meanwhile, Keeper Davis is going to return to Southport and find volunteers to assist these two keepers in performing the rescue of the crew of the Three Sisters schooner. And the volunteers that help, I'm going to list them off because it's kind of impressive, their feat, and I want to give them credit. And if Frank Newton is out there listening, you're going to find that some of these names are familiar, Frank. It was J.E. Price and Samuel Brinkman. Samuel Brinkman and J.E. Price, they would have a long tenure as employed surfmen in the life-saving service here on Bald Head Island. Samuel Brinkman would actually become a keeper in the early 20th century. But they volunteer in the off-season to help during this rescue of the three sisters. We have Samuel Newton, Tommy St. George, Wesley Smith, Crawford Watts, Robert Weeks, Joe Newton, and Moses Stepney. All volunteer their services, and by 1 a.m. on August the 29th, Keeper Davis arrives with these volunteers over on Bald Head Island to rendezvous with Captain Watts and come up with a game plan on how they're going to rescue these men. Well, they decide that they're not going to launch their surfboat to perform this rescue until dawn breaks the next morning. And the waves are so rough, they actually have to launch their surfboat in the saltwater marsh, go out the mouth of the Cape Fear River, cross behind me up South Beach, go out around the Cape, and then back up East Beach. Again, all in the middle of a hurricane this is occurring. This is incredible. These are not surfboats that are run by motorboats. These volunteers, they're putting their lives in their hands with no pay, no obligation. They in Southport, the safety of their home. No, they decide to go out here and row these surfboats in the middle of a hurricane, plenty of nautical miles out around the Cape from the mouth of the river, and they successfully rescue all 6 crew members of the three sisters by shortly in the morning of August 29th, 1893. Let me check in on Facebook. Frank Newton, my great-great-grandfather, worked under Dunbar Davis. Yeah! At one time, both my great-grandfathers each worked for the life-saving service at the same time, one on Bald Head and one on Oak Island. Great-grandfather Newton and great-grandfather Pinner. I believe great-grandfather Newton is pictured in that book. Not in this book, but he is, Frank, in David Stick's book about Bald Head Island. I was trying to bring us to where that picture is of your great-grandfather, Frank, on Bald Head Island. It's on it's called a place called Surfman's Walk, but we're unable to get enough Wi-Fi and cell signal to bring you to that station. The other day when I was having all those issues, that's where I was trying to bring you. But we'll post that pictures in the comments, Frank, so everybody out there can watch. Hey, Tony, Kathy, good afternoon, Travis and Chris. Travis, jealous of you sitting on the beach. All right.
Started again. We had a little blooper.
I think we're having a lot of issues with the Wi-Fi there. I'm hearing a lot of comments. Hey Mackie. Yeah, Mackie is saying that the bad storm last night is lots of problems. So we're gonna keep going and hope for the best here. Our luck has not been very good with technology today. Good. Alright, so by dawn on August 29th, Keeper Watts, Keeper Davis, and all their volunteers, they get the 6 crew members of the 3 schooners back over to Southport. And it's in Southport that Keeper Davis looks back towards Oak Island and realizes that his wife has raised a distress flag on the flagpole at Oak Island Life-Saving Service. So Keeper Davis races back to Oak Island Station to find what is the reason that his wife has called a distress flag or signal. And it's there he learns that there's a German brig called the Wustrow that has crashed aground down near Lockwood's Ferry at the very other end of Oak Island. And he climbs his lookout tower. And not only does he realize there's a German brig that has crashed aground on Oak Island, he also notices that there's another schooner, a second ship, that is in distress offshore of Oak Island. And this is a 419-ton schooner called the Katie Gifford. That's home base is in New Jersey, and there's a crew of 7 aboard. So Keeper Davis and some volunteers, they try to enlist the help of a pilot boat and another boat in the Cape Fear River to go out beyond the bar and perform these rescues. But the crew of this pilot boat and this other vessel, they're too scared. They're too worried that the waves and the wind is too strong during this hurricane. So Keeper Davis goes back to Oak Island, and he realizes that the only way he's going to perform this rescue is by pulling out his beach apparatus cart and hauling it miles upon miles down the beach strand of Oak Island in the middle of a hurricane to perform the rescue using a breeches buoy. Now I'm going to recap what a breeches buoy is in a minute. But they're unable to reach the Katie Gifford by dark. It's too strong. If you read in the accounts, the waves, the storm tide has pushed the beach strand back almost to the dunes. They're pulling this heavy cart with lots of weight on board, and they're pulling it by hand, so they're just unable to get down the beach strand before nightfall. So it's around 10 p.m. that Keeper Watts arrives on the beach that is directly across from the Katie Gifford that is stranded offshore. And it is then that he learns that the German brig, the Wustrow, the other ship that is crashed aground, that crew was rescued by some local farmers. So the German brig, the Wustrow, is taken care of. The crew is safely ashore. So now Keeper Davis can focus just on one ship, the Katie Gifford. So these volunteers, he adds some volunteers to his kind of collection. It's F.W. Fulcher, D.W. Fulcher, H.E. Mintz, L.A. Galloway, and Raymond Williams. Some more very, very common names in Southport, the lower Cape Fear region. These men around 10 o'clock that night arrive at the Katie Gifford, loading their beach apparatus cart. And this includes this Lyle gun, and that's how they're going to rescue these men aboard the Katie Gifford. They're not going to launch their surf boats. The wind is too strong, the night is dangerous. They're going to use their Lyle gun, and that's that small cannon that they load on the beach, and they use a cannonball that weighs roughly 17 pounds to fire and land a bunch of ropes, of life-saving lines that are between the beach and the distressed vessel out in the water. And then on those ropes they put a pulley with a breeches buoy attached. And this is this apparatus that looks like the common kind of tube or life preserver we're all familiar with, the donut-shaped life preserver, except this one has a pair of pants sewed into the hull. So the idea was the pulley would send the breeches buoy out to the shipwreck, and one of the survivors would put the pair of pants on and hold on to the life preserver because they would be repelled over the water down the ropes the whole way to the shore. And they used that back and forth until everybody was saved. Now by 2 p.m. on August the 30th now, a full day, more than a full day has passed since they've begun saving and rescuing all these distressed vessels in this hurricane. Just a feat amongst itself, folks. But by 2 a.m. on now August the 30th, they have fired their first life-saving lines from the Lyle gun out to the Katie Gifford offshore. But it's so dark. Unfortunately, the crew on the Katie Gifford does not know that the life-saving line has been fired from the Lyle gun and has reached their ship successfully. It's too dark. They can't see the line. They can't see where the cannonball, their projectile, has landed. So, unfortunately for the life-saving crew, for Keeper Davis, they remain on shore in the middle of the night, waiting for the crew to notice that their line has been delivered. That's when Keeper Watts from Baldy Island arrives on the scene, and Keeper Watts and Keeper Davis and their volunteers, they begin lighting bonfires on the beach to communicate to the Katie Gifford's crew that help is here. We're going to wait this out until dawn comes and everybody can see what's going on and what the situation is. So fortunately at dawn, the crew of the Katie Gifford notices the life-saving line, and they perform this rescue using the breeches buoy back and forth, and all the crew of the Katie Gifford is saved. Joey, great story. There's a reason it has earned the name Cape Fear. It sure has, Joey. It is feared even to this day. Chuck Hughes says, Travis, hello, Chuck. It is great to hear from you this afternoon. And Frank Newton says, thanks for the shout out, Travis. Absolutely, Frank. Thank you for joining us and listening. So it is dawn now, August the 30th. More than a day has passed since that first shipwreck occurred in the middle of this hurricane. And that afternoon on the 30th, a lifeboat arrived on Oak Island, and it has even more mariners that were caught in the middle of this hurricane. 7 men arrive on Oak Island aboard this lifeboat, and they're from 2 different ships that have wrecked in the middle of the hurricane. The Jenny E. Thomas is a 3-masted schooner that is wrecked offshore of Baldy Island and Oak Island, and the Enchantress is a 371-ton schooner. It has a cargo of railroad ties, and they are traveling between Port Royal down in South Carolina and New York City. So 7 men arrive ashore on Oak Island, and that is 7 more men that Keeper Watts and Keeper Davis has to care for until this storm subsides. So by 9 o'clock on August the 30th, this is our tally for the longest day of Dunbar Davis. Pretty fair to call it the longest day of John L. Watts, too. The Katie Gifford is rescued on Baldy Island's East Beach with a surf boat. 6 crew members are rescued aboard the Katie Giffords. Aboard the Jenny E. Thomas and the Enchantress, 7 crew members arrive aboard a lifeboat by themselves that they've rowed ashore on Oak Island. I'm sorry. Okay, let me go back with this here. My notes are blowing in the wind here. So we have the 3 sisters whose 6 crew members are rescued with a surf boat from Baldy Island's East Beach. We have the Kate E. Gifford, an additional 6 crew members that are rescued using the Lyle gun and the breeches buoy from Oak Island. You have the Jenny Thomas and the Enchantress, 7 crew members that rescue themselves aboard a surf boat or lifeboat that arrives ashore on Oak Island. And then you have the Wustro and their 4 crew members that are rescued by some local farmers on the Oak Island area. All these men by 9 o'clock in the evening on August the 30th are sitting in Oak Island's life-saving service station. They're wet, they're tired, they're bruised, they're wounded, they're probably hungry, cold, and it is going to be another day until they are able to safely go back to the mainland at Southport and kind of pick up the pieces of their lives after this storm passes. Now for Dunbar Davis, he had gone without food for 2 days during this hurricane. He went without water for 12 hours, and he was 50 years old when he did all this. 50 years old. It's kind of incredible. John L. Watts, the keeper from Baldy Island, was 49 years old when he did, 39 years old when he did all this. 39 years old. So these are not young men. They're middle-aged or are, getting up there in age. But still they had the audacity and the courage and the bravery to perform all these rescues in the middle of a hurricane from Baldy Island and from Oak Island. And that, my friends, is the longest day of Dunbar Davis and our keeper here on Baldy Island, John L. Watts. Let me check back in on Facebook and see what's going on here. I can barely see. Brent says, awesome stories. Thanks as always, Travis. You are very welcome, Brent. Thank you for joining us. So we will be back here tomorrow morning with an edition of Quarantine Collections, and in a edition of Touring with Travis. I'm sorry that we've gotten so kind of convoluted today with the technology. It's been a really rough day. There was a bad storm here last night, and we're thinking the Wi-Fi and whatnot has been affected by that storm. So we're hoping that tomorrow is a better day with the technology. So my friends, we will see you tomorrow for another full day of virtual programming. Until then, you all stay safe, you stay healthy out there. Keep positive, and we'll see you tomorrow, folks. Thank you.